checklist as well.
Gerard, are you there?
Yes, sorry. I'm going to share my screen now. Might be easier to move to and fro. Okay, so who feels they haven't had a chance to at least look at what was provided? And now, Fora, you please have to assist
Sure, no problem.
with any hands or stuff.
So did everybody, so is there anyone that did not have chance to look at the documents? Gerard, you can maybe just show them those documents. Seems like everybody had an opportunity to download and access it. So we don't expect you to fully cover and read everything as of yet. We understand that's a challenge. But let's work from that then.
That's the document that I'm looking for.
Okay, so while Gerard
Okay.
is just, you ready?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Okay, so while Gerard is just quickly sorting out the documents or finding a way to display it properly, just a request, when we are done with this assessment or exercise, that you would please dispose the documents and not save it or store it or keep it on record. I mean, you're more than welcome to keep the checklist. You're more than welcome to keep the guideline. You're more than welcome to keep any notes or anything that you've learned. But the actual application from the for the above 1 megawatt project, please just dispose it. It's just so that we don't want to share these documents outside. Like I said, we only use it for internal purposes. And I can almost guarantee you one of the days you will have your own applications with a lot of documents. So you'll get your share of information coming in soon. So let's just use it for the training purposes, and when we're done, please dispose it. Yeah, so just use it for now. We trust that you would cooperate in that regard. Thank you, Gerard.
Okay, thank you for okay, so yeah, what do you guys think about the application so far? Maybe just one or two general comments, especially somebody who's had time to look at it. No takers. I see there is maybe.
Franz said chat or hand.
You can speak. Obviously, there's not a lot of takers.
Yeah. Arnold says not completed. Franz got his hand up. Shiraz says there seems to be existing steam generator and this is a second application. Franz?
Well, yes, yeah, thank you. I think it's the application form itself is quite extensive, and yes, I think just one of the notes that I've made at the bottom is look, if you think about Annexure A, is basically the conditions that they need to adhere to, if not by either NRS or by what SANS, whatever, and so on, or grid code. So if it comes there, I'm just picking up that annexure still speaks to up to 1 megawatt. Okay, so and then also maybe just something that to mention that should this have an effect on the maybe it's Eskom NMD, also to what's the name, to that will also be applied back to the generator as well. But yes, I think it's like our colleague says, it's not fully complete, but I think it's if we say not complete, maybe it's because it's steam. Steam is slightly different than the solar PV and so on. But yeah, so that was just my quick observation in terms of the application. But I think the most critical part has been captured there.
Thank you, Franz. So yes, that is one of the reasons I thought this is actually a good example, is because everybody expects to see PV applications because that's what everybody speaks about. So to see just a slightly different application for once, I think is very good. So, okay,
Yeah.
anything else? Yes.
Yeah, so I'll read it for you. So Shiraz just said that there seems to be an existing steam generator, so this is the second application to expand. Gerard made the point, Mark made the point, not sure how they all fit into the evaluation process. So that's a concern in terms of the documentation. Mark, I think that's what you're referring to. How the documentation and the reports would fit into the evaluation process.
Not immediately clear, agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Naveen saying this project is brownfield project. I see you've got your hand up, Naveen. And then Shiraz just saying that the NMD is strange. 46 MVA, 47 if you round it up. Yes, Naveen?
Thanks, Farah and Gerard. Yeah, just to give some background, when we started the project, I think Gerard mentioned that treat it as if you received it from, let's say, an engineer that had left the organization and you got this bundle of documents. So I inherited this from an engineer that was working on it for a couple of years. And yes, correctly pointed out, the form that we used was up to 1 megawatt. We didn't have any other application form, so we used the existing form. And there has been numerous toing and froing in terms of filling in the form. And I think the form that I shared with the Gerard for the purposes of the exercise is not the final one that was submitted and signed off by the MD of the organization. So yes, in terms of the maximum demand of 46,787 kVA, I think initially they were trying to sum up all the old generators that they had, and they were trying to account for the total generation plant on site. So a lot of this we have corrected, and we have made significant progress with the applicant.
Thank you, Naveen. Yeah, so I didn't know that Naveen had inherited this project, but I thought that was a good way to look at it. So yes, it says there's already an existing generator. Maybe one point. I don't think it matters that the application form at this point said less than 1 megawatt. If that's what you've got, use it until you've got it updated. Okay, there's an existing one. There's the existing output. Just this, this seems to me to be the generator transformer parameters. So yes, even so, it is a strange value. But this would not refer to the NMD, in my opinion, not in the first place. Although they might share the transformer, and then of course it would be similar. Okay, so they say no islanding, single line diagram. I think that's attached as a different file. Now, this is one of those things where you have to tick a few aspects. Is the embedded generation system designed to comply with the South African Renewable Energy Grid Code? In this case, maybe it would be good to have a not applicable, because it's, I don't know, Navin, do you know what the fuel source is?
That's a steam driven turbine.
Yeah, but what
Part
is
of
the
the cogen, and I think there is a little coal. I did see some coal on site when I've been to the plant.
okay? Right, because if it was biomass, it could actually fall under renewable, and then it would have had to comply. That just shows another shortcoming in the grid code, because in essence you have two identical applications, and just because the one use coal, it doesn't have to comply with these requirements. It has to comply with different ones. Yeah, 097 isn't applicable because only the small one exists. 048, that would, in my assumption, refer back to emission limits. And then a reference to Annexure A. And there's the whole list of information. So as Navin has indicated, this has actually been updated, and whatever was missing has been added. It's also possible that we deleted this because with the anonymization process.
Yeah, that's true.
So with this, given the little bit of additional information that we received, I would, for instance, say yes. Happy that it's been completed. Why doesn't it want to do that? Mark it like that. And then application fee, that is really an internal process. That's something you will know. And we assume by this time they've received the information pack and you've got a good idea. Or let me say, by raise of hands, who doesn't have a reasonable idea of what should go into that information pack?
I'll just repeat, is it the question who does know or who does not know?
Who does not know? Who doesn't feel, if they can't list it, can actually go and find what should be in there?
Seems like everybody knows. We should maybe ask them then.
Okay, that's very good to hear. Yes. Let me just get that document open again as well. So just to make sure, in the step 1 application, go to the application, and then the application pack, there's the information pack, list of the stuff that one would expect them to receive. So yes, even if you don't know what it should be, I hope you know where to find a good list. And if you want to add something to that, please do. If you think something is not important, think about it, and then you can leave it out if necessary. Right, so is everybody happy? Well, at least that's the easy part.
Yeah,
Once you've put the application part together, etc.
Gerard, would you mind
Yes.
maybe in the comment section, if it's not going to take too much time, just write out when it's an internal process or developer process. I think that will help, to guide to see, like that would be, an internal or distributor. Yes, there we go. Action, distributed action or something like that. Let me know.
Section 2.1.
Good.
We can go down a little bit more, so 2.1.1. How do I make this smaller again? There. Okay, and of course, the application fee, this would be internal as well.
Isn't that
Okay.
the developer paying that? Sorry, Gerard?
He's paying it, but
Finance.
you will check.
Okay.
Okay. Generator to pay
Yes.
internal information. And then maybe I'll add here that okay.
Gerard? Okay, sorry.
Yes.
No. Yeah, no, just, it might be a bit small for some. Could you maybe zoom in?
Nope. There's no in between. Let's see.
Seems
Let me do it this
to
way.
me.
Is it fine, Josh? Okay, no.
Just have to retype it quickly. So
But yeah, while Gerard is typing that out, I think it's quite crucial that if there's something that's not clear, now's the time to ask. Because in essence, this is what you're going to do when processing above 1 meg applications. So let's try to make sure we understand the steps. While Gerard is busy with that, let's maybe ask the audience. The next step is grid impact study. What would you say there, based on the information provided? You can type it out, or you can send it on WhatsApp, or you can raise your hand and mention it. So this is specifically a grid impact study. We'll get to grid code compliance.
Present in some of the states now that used to be that people start to look at where valuations.
Okay, so you're saying grid study done on customer plant, but don't see anything on the municipal network or upstream. Fault level study was completed. George Lotte says nope.
Yes, okay, the fault study that I saw was more from a measurement point of view. I don't know, my computer is frozen now, I'm sorry. See if I can sort that out.
Your computer realized it was Friday.
I don't know. I think it's our network's issue because this is directly on Teams or SharePoint, and yeah, if it doesn't find what it wants to find, it's just going wonky.
Otherwise, Gerard, try to work with the PDF. I mean, the time is crucial.
Okay.
I'm chasing
Yeah.
you, jumping around. I don't
No.
want to hold the guys back.
So let's continue with that then. Okay, so we show what we have again. So now we're looking for a grid impact study. I think you've mentioned there was a question, is this grid code compliant or not? This is grid impact. I haven't seen anything that I saw like grid impact. There's loading is a measurement report. Yeah, so
Naveen, sorry, Gerard. Naveen, you've got your hand up. I mean, you guys can help us if there's
Gerard,
something that we've missed.
Yes, Gerard, you're right. There has been, we did receive a power factory model of the plant.
okay.
And yeah, there was simulations done. And even we did get a subsequent detail protection setting report. This was one of the earlier reports that I shared.
Okay. So the grid impact, did you do that or did somebody else do that?
The grid impact we didn't worry too much about because the customer is 30 MVA load. And we didn't, this generator, I think it's 11.5 MVA. So we didn't do any analysis on our side. We are at the moment,
Okay.
we are still battling with, we do have a very outdated power factory model. And we have been in discussions with Dixieland to update our model. We do have an updated model on GIS. So we are working closely with Jivan to see if we can export that model to Power Factory and then create an updated model.
Okay.
So there's a fair amount of work that we need to do on our side.
So maybe just a question on this application. Is this 32.6 megawatt, is that the total generation capacity after this installation?
Yeah, that's correct. So this one's 11.5. They've got a Siemens, and I think they've got one more. So they're going to decommission 2 old generators. And they'll, instead, they'll be left with the Siemens and then the Strivini unit.
Okay. Yeah, that's just for me a little bit confusing. It says, do you have existing generation? Yes. If yes, what's the output? So I would have thought this is for the existing generation, and then this is just for the new one.
The existing is a sum of 3. So that's what they had historically on site. But they're going to decommission 2 of that 3 and then put this new one in, 11.5.
Okay, so that actually makes sense then, that you are not as concerned because it's in essence a replacement and not a new installation.
That's correct, Gerard. And I was just thinking it'll be difficult for the rest of the attendees to follow because this is essentially like a brownfields project, and the complete construction is within the plant of the applicant. There's very little interface between us as the municipality and the applicant. But there were some challenges which I can share with the team later.
Okay, so I'll just confirm what we now discussed is that there's an existing generator, 3, and in essence, 2 of the existing ones are being replaced with another single one. So that is why a grid impact study is, in this case, not as critical, because you're just replacing something. It's most likely not going to have any impact on the grid different to before. So if anybody didn't follow that, just raise your hand and we can discuss again. So in this case, this one would be not applicable.
So, Gerard, if I understand correctly, this is not it's not a new application. It's a client with an existing generation, and they want to they're decommissioning some of the existing generation to install a new, larger generation unit. And
Yes.
the reason why they don't have to do a grid impact study is because they're still within the same capacity of generation.
Yes, that would be it.
Okay. There are a few questions in the chat comments. I see there's some Ishmael pointing at 13.75, but really talking about 600 kVA. Won't the final be a 32.6 MVA plus 11.5 MVA? George, you've got your hand up.
Yes, thanks for it. Maybe just a question, Gerard. This is an existing system, and they are basically applying to make changes to it. Question is whether it was approved previously, and since they're making changes, should you not treat it as if it's a new application and check for all the other grid compliance, etc., that is required? In other words, handle it or treat it as if it's a new application.
Yes. So the first thing is that, okay, let's start with it's a replacement, and you wanted to know if the previous one was approved. I suspect in this case it was approved, but that is actually not, for this case study, that's not important. It's a good question, but I think you can assume that it was approved. So that was the one point.
Yes,
Okay.
Gerard, sorry, maybe just a comment on that. And it might have been approved. So let's assume it was approved, but maybe on a different set of parameters or requirements or rules, if you want to call it that. So it seems like it was quite a long time ago since they're decommissioning some of these units. So I would think that they might have come to a, they've worked for some time, come to a point now where they are inefficient, and that's why they're replacing them.
Yeah, that's the end of life kind of replacement, correct. So that probably means that previously there wasn't a grid code to comply with in the same sense that we have now. But even now, the renewable power plant grid code isn't applicable. The actual generation code is still applicable. And there's quite a bit that's in there. So I can't comment on the grid code compliance. But in terms of...
If I can come in, sorry,
Yes.
Naveen. If I can come in, the applicant was adamant that they wanted to get the NASA licensing, and that was prior to the changes in the ERA. So as I said, this project started about 3 years ago, and at that time, they wanted licensing, and they've been engaging directly with NASA also on this application.
You know, that's so ironic that there's somebody who wants to follow the right process, and now that license isn't necessary anymore. But yeah, thanks. So, okay. These people have obviously tried to follow the book. So let's assume that everything was in place. Yes, you get a new generator. There is a possibility that it doesn't comply, and that has to be checked. So especially when the new grid code for generators is coming out, where everything is combined, it will be easier for people to see what they need to comply with, depending on whichever technology they've got. It'll be just more streamlined. But given that we speak about, this is actually the impact on the distributor network. So that's the first question. I want to know, is there any problem with my network as the distributor? Usually I would say having a grid impact study is not negotiable. You must have that. But in this case, I can understand, because it's in fact the refurbishment, or it's a replacement of existing generation. I understand that the end size is going to be similar to what was there before. And since it's similar technology, chances of having an impact on the network is less. So remember, a grid impact study looks at the worst case. So it doesn't actually take into account the fact that you might have something that's now more fancy than previously, and it mitigates the impact on your network. It looks at the worst case. If the entire generator trip, what's the voltage change? When the generator operates at maximum power output and whichever power factor, what are my voltages? Are my transformers overloaded? Are my lines overloaded? That's what the grid impact study looks at. So in this case, give or take maybe a few percent in the new size, the impact would be the same as before.
Sorry, Gerard,
Okay.
I'll let you, I'll probe you if there's a question that you might need to respond to.
Okay. All right. So from that point of view, this is a very good example where we didn't need the grid impact study. It's one of those rare examples. Other necessary studies undertaken. So Naveen, you've just confirmed that and it does say the short circuit has provided a model of the present configuration of the electrical network. So they did use the Dick-Silent model, and then from there calculated the expected fault levels. Don't actually see the values.
Gerard, which value are you looking for?
No, what are the actual short circuit values?
Yeah, if somebody knows, Naveen, maybe you know as well if it's in the report.
I think it's towards the bottom end, near to the summary. There's a table.
No, at the summary, but I don't see the table.
Just go further down. It's beyond. It's below the diagrams.
This is loading. This is measured results. So you basically have the background harmonics. It's always good to have.
Page 15.
Okay, yes. Okay, so on the 11 kV side, they here show the rating is 750 MVA and the calculated values is around 600. And that is how many percent? So pull up the calculator here to show everybody. So it's about 600 divided by 750. gives me 80%. So it's on the upper range that you would use, but that's not too much.
Gerard, I just wanted to ask with regard to that table, the very last row where it says eThekwini substation. Is that the
Yes.
municipal intake? Because they put question marks there with regard to the short circuit rating.
That is my understanding, yes, that would be at the municipal side. So now this is what needs to be checked on the distributor side, if their rating is sufficient. And just to get a gut feel, so about 1.5 divided by 0.8. So it must be about, you have a 2000 MVA rating there, that should not be an issue. 25 KA on 33, yeah, that should still be fine, depending on how old the eThekwini substation is. Okay, on the checklist, there's quality of supply background that's been measured. Navin, do you know if you did apportioning? Is anything like that done?
No, Gerard, we didn't do a portioning.
Okay, that's fine. I think in this case as well, synchronous generators are usually regarded as relatively clean in terms of harmonics, so that's not going to be an issue. So based on what we've discussed now and what we've seen, I would say this is actually it's a nice X. Everything is done. I'll just say so I wouldn't recommend not to put the power quality apportioning in your contracts, even if it is synchronous. But in this case, I would not be too concerned again, given that what I've heard of the application now. Everybody with me? Okay. So from here, and yeah, the cost estimate letter is once again distribute. Process. So that would be for the distributor to issue the cost estimate, and then the generator customer accept. That's purely procedural. Nothing much to happen there. Any comments, questions?
There's a
Yes?
question. Does a distributor complete the short circuit protection coordination studies? Is that the distributors? Who does the short circuit protection coordination?
Okay, so the short circuit and the protection coordination at this stage. All right, this is the first stage. So you, in reality, just want to look at potential issues. So it's not, see, when you get to, this is step 3 then, to evaluate the application with a grid strengthening study. So that is when you really look at everything. So in the first stage, it's really just, do I have quality of supply background? It's good if you can give him the emission limits, the apportioning already, so that he knows what he's working towards. So the short circuit study, what you typically would be able to do, I think the short circuit contribution is somewhere here. Okay, so there is the fault level contribution from the embedded generators. This you can, please, as a first check, just add to what is the fault level at the moment, and you can determine what is the expected fault level. So that's just a check whether you are going to have issues or if everything seems fine at this stage. At the next stage, where you would definitely make sure that you've got the short circuit levels and that the equipment will be able to withstand that. So then you will, even from here, you will know if there's a possible problem, and just make sure that you design for upgraded equipment, whichever case may be, based on the short circuits. Everybody comfortable with that?
Great, seems good, Gerard. Sorry, Gerard, I don't want to rush you because I think it's great that we go through these things in detail, but I'm just sensitive towards time. We're sitting with
Yes.
half an hour and the survey we want to do and so on. So yeah, please, people, Naveen, if you could give input so that we could get a clear yes or no answer, please assist. But yeah, just wanted to make you aware of that. Thank you, Gerard.
Okay, so let me quickly check. Okay, there is a grid code gap analysis. I don't think I'm going to open that now. Process description for the turbine. Okay, that's for the nurse application. This is communication between, well, various parties. The settings are provided for the new generator's protection. And then, of course, there's the single line diagram. So I'm going to continue with the rest based on what we've discussed more than what we've seen in the documents. If you see that there's a problem at any point here, you will address it in step 3. So this is now step 3. So the grid strengthening study most likely is also not applicable for the same reasons that I've said up here. And the short circuit levels that we've seen, I think, is probably within acceptable levels. I'm just going to say as above. Then the internal departments sign off. That is planning. We've discussed why this is not actually a big issue at this stage. Protection, they will need to sign off. Power quality, at this stage, it's a good idea to do the apportioning. So confirm apportioning. Even though in this case, I'm not concerned about that because of the synchronous generator and the maintenance. So this is all just internal distributor processes that needs to be followed. And those documentations aren't part of this pack. So Naveen can comment if he wants to say anything.
Gerard, there has been extensive discussions with our internal protection and test engineers and the consultants that the applicant had appointed. So that was the main area. In terms of maintenance, there's no equipment on our side that needs to be maintained. And even from a planning perspective, we didn't have to do much planning or budgeting because, as I said, the bulk of the construction was within the applicant's plant.
Yeah. Okay, so planning would have signed off, assuming power quality has signed off. Those values looked reasonable. The protection, so there is some protection settings on that side. So can we assume that protection also didn't have much of an issue? Then once again, budget got issued and accepted that is just the same as these two. I don't think I can copy that. Okay. The letter of consent is not applicable. There is no wheeling. This is for self-consumption, just to energy to be used solely within a consumer's electricity network. So that's self-consumption. Then contractual, the contracts that are here would have been done weren't included, and I would be very careful to share that in any case, because that's also very confidential. Once again, just make sure, I would say, the connection agreement, and in this case, there would probably be an update to the agreement. And the rest would not really be applicable because it's
Naveen?
for self-consumption.
Now, Naveen, could you confirm if there was any of these agreements or other agreements in place?
We still got to work on this use of system agreement. Historically, it was just applications that were submitted, application fee paid, and then we had the customer. But yes, there is a gap. We've got to look at this use of system agreement and define some of the parameters like power factor. It's an area we're working on.
Yeah. I think, like we've said, and that's why that acronym is also the KIOSA. It's the connection and use of system agreement. So I think it's good that you are in discussions around that. But that's all that's really critical. I don't see anything else that's probably applicable.
So the rest we can tick off as NA.
Yes.
While Gerard is ticking that off, is there anyone that disagrees or has a different interpretation so far? Seems like we're good, Gerard.
Okay. Environmental approvals. I don't want to go through that now. Is there anybody who wants to comment on any aspect?
So bulk of this would be orientated towards the developer.
Yeah, it's the developer and to prove compliance, meeting the requirements. There's the building regulations is that you possibly will have to have, because the generator would be built on a different site before the others are decommissioned. And I don't think there's any zoning that would have changed. Okay. So that was step 4. We did that one very quickly. This is step 4, contracts and agreements. Step 5 is design.
Sorry, Gerard. Gerard made a point about operations agreement will be required. Would that agreement be part of the connection agreement?
Yeah, you will see also the draft connection agreement. It's Appendix B is basically an operations agreement. So if you want me to change it like that, I'll just say okay, thank you.
George has his hand up.
Yes, thanks for it. Gerard, maybe just a question with regards to the environmental. We say we leave the bulk of that for the generator to basically prove from his side.
Mhm.
On our checklist, how would we know now what is applicable and not? So in other words, he could, for instance, say a water use license is not required, but if you read through it, then they use water to spray the steam to cool it down. And whether who decides, how do you know, okay, it's applicable or it's not applicable? It's required and I need to tick it yes, or I can just leave it as not applicable.
Okay, my recommendation at this point is to have an environmental specialist. There are a few companies and they must basically state with that.
Okay, so but once again, that goes to
It's the same as
generator.
what we've
So the
said with other
generator will-
things.
Sorry, so the generator will appoint that environmental specialist.
They have to. I would say it's the responsibility of the customer.
Thank you.
Okay. So on the design side, then this is step 5. So technical specification and approval. I think nothing has changed in this instance again. Vin did give a little bit of background to me about the way the bus bars were configured. So they did ask the customer to make some changes and add some breakers for protection. But in this case, I don't think anything else has changed here. And Navin, jump in if there's anything that you or your colleagues want to say.
Gerard, while Naveen is coming online, just to confirm, so this is now in the this specific section is in the context of grid strengthening work that's being done. Then you would use this specific section. And in this case, nothing has been done in that regard. So there's no capital improvement, procurement, or anything like that.
Yes. Yeah. Because there is no need for any upgrade. If they needed a new meter, well, it's unlikely they would probably have had the correct meter already, or a correct meter. So all of this is not applicable.
And the point which Mark mentioned before the break was that in most cases, there's sufficient capacity and seldom the grid strengthening is required. It might be that there's, upgrading of protection, there might be an upgrading of, like I said, meters or so on, but in terms of grid strengthening, this might be a section that won't be used too much. Although there is a metering equipment section in the next table, no? Oh, it's okay. The design and construction. Okay, I see you. Thank you.
So possibly.
Just as a background, the municipal substation that feeds the plant is about 5 years old. It's a fairly new 132 to 33 kV substation, brand new switchboard. So on our side, there was no need for any network strengthening or improvement.
That's very good to know as well, yes. Okay. So this was actually a very easy project, Naveen. I'm joking.
Yes, because it was the first one, we're still learning. And we've learned a lot from you and from the session.
Yusuf, you put your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to inquire with regard to the transformers that the customer was going to use with the generator. I think they spoke about a is it a 63 amp NER or 63 ohm NER or something. I understand from the network study that Naveen said it might not be necessary and it's a very new sub. But is there anything on the new transformer, gen transformer, that might impact on the single phase earth fault condition of the municipal network? In other words, the earthing on the
Yeah. Naveen, do you know if their transformer was replaced or if it's still the same one?
No, they don't have a gen type setup, gen transformer type setup. It's like a very unique plant that we supply. They don't have their own 33 kV board. So we supply directly into the plant at various parts of their plant where they've got huge or big machinery. And so we supply onto the 33 kV bushing, and then they step down to 11 kV. So they've got their own internal 11 kV ring. And they had these the historical generators, and they've removed the two. This new one goes in on the same plinth of the one that has been removed. And then they tie in to the existing 11 kV network. So they haven't really changed much in terms of the design. The one thing we were trying to get them to do is put in those additional breakers so we could implement the breaker fail. And they were reluctant to do that.
Yeah, I think that is very often, if a customer changes something, it allows you to actually bring in new requirements that you couldn't do until they asked to change something in terms of the contract with you. So they are going to be hesitant. All right. Construction side, in this case, it's not applicable, and maybe I'm just going to add, yeah, that substation was recently upgraded, or is that acceptable? Then anything on the customer side that you requested, Naveen? I only see the settings documents.
As I mentioned earlier, we did request that they do a grid impact study on their side. And that's where they did share with us the results of, they built the model in Power Factory. They've done the simulations and they made that available to us. And we did ask for a new protection philosophy document. So they did do a detailed protection philosophy and settings document, which they provided to us.
Okay.
And then, yeah, the results of the grid impact study was also shared with us. And we used that as the gaps on that were identified in that report as like our point of departure. So they have closed out most of, and they still want to complete the exercise. So we're almost there.
Okay, so have they constructed anything yet?
Yes, they have. They've got the generator on site. And they have done some preliminary testing.
So you're probably still waiting for some of the certificates like the anti-islanding, because they said they don't island.
Did request to be present to witness some of the tests, but the last correspondence I got from them, they've actually got some problems with the generator on the mechanical side that needs some repairs.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay, so this is still outstanding. That's fine. Right, so the commissioning, do they have permission to synchronize yet?
I think our network control have agreed that they can go ahead.
Okay. So then, of course, the rest of this is still outstanding. They're probably busy with the commissioning, and that's why they've picked up some issues. Okay, so this was step 6, 7, and 9.
George's hand.
5, 6, and 7. Yes.
Maybe just a question on the application form. Maybe Navid, you can just provide clarity on that. On the application form, there is a checkbox, big red one, that says permission to synchronize or to connect embedded generation to grid. This indicates you wish to synchronize your generation system to the grid. So that's only a request for them. It's not a permission.
Yeah, I guess it's giving them the permission to connect and run in parallel to the grid. That's my understanding.
Okay, but it's something that the customer fills in. Maybe that's a question. Sorry, I maybe made a statement, but the question is that something that the customer fills in?
Yes, this form is filled by the customer. So I'm assuming that if he leaves it unticked, then it's probably just going to operate like an island type setup.
Yeah, backup generation.
Okay.
But yeah, I see what the permission to connect EG to grid. It doesn't say that you request it. So it might be confusing.
Yeah, usually there's something or a portion of the form that says for official use only or something. And then after you receive the form, that's something, you know, a note or something where you can then give permission and you tick it. But yeah, in this case, it's something that the customer fills in. So maybe just a side comment that it, as Gerard mentioned, might be a bit confusing.
Yeah, okay. So I'm just going to state here that these are still outstanding. And then with the grid card compliance, step 8. Okay, this was not done. I'm going to say it's basically replacement of existing synchronous generator. Grid card compliance achieved. I don't think that's not yet. So that is still in progress. And of course, the power quality assessment, you've received the background harmonics. Have you received anything subsequent to the installation? I assume not.
No, not yet.
Okay. So that's still outstanding. And in this instance, I would just take a look at the background and the after connection values and make sure that there's nothing that popped out since they've connected their generator. If something popped out, let's say the 7th is suddenly extremely high, then it would make sense to just investigate what's happening.
Noted.
Okay, and then the rest is for use by the customer. And this comes from the renewable energy grid code. So I do understand that in this case, the customer would say it's not applicable. So you'll have to go through to the actual generation code to look at all of those requirements. Similar to this, but not everything is the same. So for the rest, we don't need to fill in anything right now. It would be useful if the customer tells you, okay, year and year and year are the proofs. Or in our recommendation at this stage, a registered person signs off, professionally registered person, and just say, yes, everything is fine before you do give the approval. Okay, did that help? I think so that we've basically looked at everything.
Gerard, I'm just quickly looking at some of the feedback. Frans said there might not be something under capital, but under O&M consumables, there might be small charges required. Maybe you've discussed it. I don't know if I maybe missed that discussion. And then Jan just mentioned just underneath is signature line not completed. I think that was on one of the other points.
Yeah, I think that is actually the application form. But Naveen has said they have updated the application form and completed it, which is a later version than the one that he shared.
Okay, good. Okay, so Mike says it helps. Anyone else would like to maybe give their view of the checklist or going through this exercise? Gerard says checklist very useful, very informative.
And I'd like to just comment here that the checklist has already gone through probably about 3 iterations, but one will only see when people start using it where the glitches are. So unfortunately, any new document that gets published, there's always comments that have to come back very quickly for these things to be updated. When people start using it, you get the feedback, and I think we'll update this one fairly soon to be a little bit more user-friendly.
But Gerard, I think just to add, I mean, even our SCCG documents we're updating as legislation and regulations has changed. So it's common practice to adapt and adopt documents. But what I can state, and you can confirm this, is that what the people have in hand is quite credible to work with, because we really applied our mind, or at least you and Mark and the consultants that was asked to look at the documents. So it's a good reference document where everything is in one hand. So in one document to use. So don't feel like because there's gaps you can't use it. It's a very sensible document to cover, and it's there to help you or the utilities to be able to process and approve systems. Gerard, you said you wanted to maybe just show 1 or 2 examples of what you would have liked to see in an application. Don't know if you have that ready to share.
So maybe just for those of you, well, we didn't see that really now. There is another project that we are assisting on, and the grid impact study was now done. And actually, the report that they submitted is basically grid impact study and grid code compliance in one. And just for, I know this is how it comes out of the report, so the gray makes it a little bit less legible. But in the executive summary, there's a table. These are all the requirements typically used. This is typical grid impact study requirements, and these ones here, grid impact study. And then from here, it actually starts with some grid code compliance. And then on the second page, there's a grid code compliance. You'll see, okay, it says pass everywhere. So you still have to go into the document and see if they actually tell or show you that what they said is the criteria here is really met. But this is a very good, in my opinion, way to just present the results. It makes it easy. And this would primarily be for the client, and you can say, oh, I must pay more attention to, for argument's sake, voltage variation limits was not within spec. So, okay, let's just go and look at that more careful and see what needs to change. So that's just to show you what one can possibly expect if there's a good executive summary as well. Then it seems almost that we've almost made up for the time. So
Yeah.
now is the time for general questions. Anything that you still feel is outstanding or not clear?
Gerard, if I maybe can make a comment from Mark's question. He said that, you know, looking at the application or the application documents which you provided as an example, it wasn't very clear how to utilize or where to start to complete and fill in the the checklist. And I think now that this guideline is there and it's clear in terms of what you would like to see, I foresee when developers compile the report or compile the relevant documents, it will go into that framework or that sequence or that format, which will, obviously ease the process of checking. I'm looking for this, it's here. I'm looking for this, it's here. I'm looking for this, that it almost like the table that you've shown there, that's nice all together. And I think we should not forget a lot of the developers, they want to comply, but they're not sure what to comply to. They don't know what the utilities are looking for, asking for, and we've experienced this in the industry as well. So having the guideline will help them to structure their response in a similar format and sequence, which will help the utility to cross-reference and check and say, okay, we can tick it off, than jumping between the documents and trying to make your own interpretation. So that's the challenge we've got in this undefined environment. So yeah, and then thank you for the comments. But yeah, the floor is open for any general comments, any general questions, anything specifically that was not clear. Maybe for those who have process systems above 1 megawatt, you still have a burning question or something like, we're in this process, but we're stuck here. What do we do there? Feel free to share. Mark, I think you've got your mic open for a while.
In fact, I didn't, and I don't have anything at this point. So,
Sorry,
thanks,
Mark.
Laura.
Thanks. Okay, anyone else? Okay, it seems like we're all good. I hope it's not just the Friday or the pre-weekend kicking in. Okay, So,
So can
yes,
I
sir.
then just jump in and say thank you to the participation and the questions? Because like I just said, although there's already a lot of inputs in this document, it's good to get the feedback from the feet on the ground, people on the coal face, who can open our eyes as well, where things are not clear. And yeah, especially with the checklist, I think I've learned a lot about how the checklist should be maybe updated. So thank you very much, everybody.
Yeah. Thank you, Gerard. I think